Hello, my name is Maureen Brennan. I'm with the Federal and State Grants Unit here at the Illinois Criminal Justice Information Authority. This afternoon we're going to take a look at travel costs. Now, as you know, the authority administers both state and federal grants, but all of our travel costs are controlled by the state travel guidelines. I encourage you to click on this link and to take a look at the state travel guidelines to familiarize yourself with them. The current travel rates for calendar year 2017 is a mileage reimbursement of 53.5 cents per mile. Now, per diem is only paid for overnight travel, and only when that overnight travel is absolutely necessary. The in-state per diem is charged at $7 per quarter of the day, so the traveler should keep track of the time that they left on business in the morning and they returned home at night, and they should count up the quarters of the day during which they traveled. For out-of-state travel, per diem is charged at $8 per quarter. Now, there are maximum lodging rates. The state travel guides establish the maximum lodging rate within Illinois. The maximum lodging rates outside of Illinois, though, are governed by the Federal General Services Administration. This is their website. Now, even if you will receive a state grant through the authority and you travel outside of Illinois, those rates are still governed by this Federal General Services Administration rate. It's actually a very accessible site. All you need to do when you reach the portal is to type in the name of your destination city or the zip code that you are seeking to travel to, and it will give you the month-by-month maximum lodging rate for that location. Now, there are some times, particularly for conference travel, when the conference lodging rate might exceed the maximum rate on the GSA website. In that case, the traveler cannot stay at the conference hotel, because the rule is that no part of lodging rates that are charged to a state or federal agreement through the authority can exceed the maximums that are charged to the agreement, even if that agency or traveler makes up the difference between the maximum rate and the rate charged. So in an example, if your conference rate is $300 a night and the maximum for that location based on the GSA or the state travel rates is $200, even if the traveler is willing to pitch in the $100 difference, the traveler may not stay at that hotel. They may not incur costs that exceed those maximum travel rates. They're just going to have to find a hotel that has a rate that works within that maximum. Now, there are really extremely rare exceptions to that rule. You know, if there really isn't a hotel at an acceptable rate at the under the maximum rate within a reasonable travel distance, then an exception may be made, but you certainly would need to get that approval in writing from your grant specialist in advance, and you're going to find that it's going to be very exceptional that you would have to get that approval, that dispensation. As I said, this is the federal GSA portal where you can get the maximum lodging rates. You'll also see that site also lists federal per diem rates, and those federal per diem rates are a lot higher than the $8 per quarter that are allowed under authority rules. But these federal per diem rates do not apply. So that's the rule, is out of state, the federal lodging rate applies, but the federal per diem rate does not. Now, even if you incorporate out-of-state travel into your budget, you must also get explicit prior approval from your grant specialist before you incur any of those travel costs. And you would do that by writing your grant specialist a letter and explicitly asking for approval for, X number of dollars for lodging, X number of dollars for airfare, for, ground transportation, for conference travel. All of those costs need to be explicitly outlined. In addition, we would ask you to attach the conference or meeting or travel agenda. That's going to be your documentation that this travel out of state is absolutely necessary. We also want to make sure that you include the list of the travelers that would be whose travel would be charged to the agreement. We want to make sure, first of all, that that's someone who is charged to the agreement. We wouldn't grant travel funds to support the travel for someone who's not on the funded program, for instance. And we want to make sure that that traveler really does need to attend this conference or meeting or training out of state. And so we really scrutinize out-of-state travel costs. But probably the most important rule is to not incur any of the out-of-state travel costs until you receive a letter from the authority approving that travel and detailing the cost that may be charged to the agreement. Internally, when your grant specialist receives that letter and all of the supporting documentation, they have to submit it to their program manager for approval. And that program manager is the person here that oversees the fund from which that grant is drawn. So they're the staff member that's very familiar with all of the requirements and all of the limitations of the use of those grant funds. They're also the content expert on the programs that are funded from that source, and so they would be the best person to determine whether or not that conference or training or travel is really necessary for the execution and the implementation of the agreement. But when in doubt, always make sure that you check with your grant specialist if you have any doubt about what documentation that you need or when you need to submit the request for out-of-state travel. Thanks very much for joining us today.